Hi there! Is it really possible to do filter FM on the Behringer DeepMind? After all, there are no audio modulation paths for the filter. As it turns out, it's not only possible, you can actually create some really nice and fat sounding patches without any of the oscillators, just by using the modulated filter as a sound source. Let's have a look. Right, let's see how we can make this work. Let's start by creating an init patch. Remove the release. And then we just switch off the two waveforms. And now we hear nothing. Let's zoom in a bit on the display so you can see what's happening. What I want to do now is to use LFO2 as the modulation source, modulating the filter cutoff at maximum depth. And we still don't hear anything because the rate of LFO2 is actually set to 0. So let's erase that and see what we can hear. Here are some clicks. That's very soft sound. Let's try to remove the velocity sensitivity on the filter and the amplifier a little bit better. What we usually need to do is to add a compressor. And let's use that in insert mode. And perhaps raise the gain a little bit. But you can still hear that we can actually increase the output level a bit as well. There's no pitch though. Whatever key I'm pressing, you get the same pitch. There's no pitch tracking. So let's fix that by adding another slot in the mod matrix. This time we're using the note number, and it should modulate the rate of the LFO2 and put the depth at maximum. And now let's see. Now we got pitch. We can affect the sound as well by changing the shape to a sine wave. But that's more or less what you would like. It's different. Slightly different. It's a bit heavier tone in the sine wave, of course, than in this triangle. The square wave is quite buzzy, and it breaks up the higher up you get on the keyboard. So I think I'll stay with the sine wave for now. That works pretty well. Also, if I now were to raise the filter cutoff, see if you can see that. We more or less get a more nasal sound. Oops, I think we're breaking up a bit there. So I tend to keep that at bottom and to get more bottom in the actual sound. The resonance though is interesting. Almost working like a cutoff. Which means we could use the filter envelope to affect the resonance instead by using the mod matrix again. So use the envelope 2 to affect the resonance and just see what works. What do we have? We can remove the sustain perhaps. You get sort of a raspy sound if we get too high on the resonance. It breaks up. Perhaps half up there somewhere. And then we can tweak the envelope. Now we actually have a sound with no oscillators. There's no oscillator 2, there's no oscillator 1. If we add those, we get a lot of extra overtones. But we can actually get a nice sound without it. And we can also use the unison mode. But of course the unison detune doesn't work since we're not using any oscillators. So how do we solve that? We need to go back to the mod matrix and use the univoice source, targeting the amount of note number modulation on the LFO2 rate. So that would be the mod slot 2 depth. If we now tweak that a bit. Now we get a nice detune. We can detune up as well, of course. But it sort of stops after a little while because the filter can't be modulated higher than the LFO is already doing. Downwards though. Now there's no modulation of the second voice. You can hear an effect here that I'm basically halving the modulation, so that means it's going to be half scale. That also has an interesting effect if we go back up to more or less 0. There's less detune in the bottom register than in the treble. Still breaking up a bit. Let's lower the VCA level. That's quite a nice pleasing sound. I think you should also be able to do things like vibrato, but of course the vibrato needs to work on the LFO2 rather than the oscillators. So let's try that. Modulation source LFO1, target would be LFO2 rate. That's a bit too much modulation. prefer that as a mono. And I don't want this all the time, so I'm going to add a mod wheel to affect the depth of slot 5. So now you can't see the mod wheel, but I'm actually using that to add the vibrato as needed. And of course you can also use the LFO to add a tremolo by affecting the filter cutoff. But that's basically it. You can of course then add effects, and you can pan the different detuned voices to different left and right speakers and so on to get more width. But this is quite a nice sound. And it's quite different from the one you get from using the DCOs. Right, let's stop there. I hope you found this tutorial informative. If you did, please give the video a like, and why not subscribe and click the notification bell as well, so that you can be alerted when I upload new videos. Thank you, and see you next time.